Before we step into the silent corridors of Egypt's forgotten palaces, let us pause. This story belongs to Amenhotep IV, who later named himself Akhenaten, the pharaoh who dared to stand against centuries of tradition. Was he a seeker of divine truth, or a king waging war against the priests of Amun? To find the answer, we will follow his footsteps from the gilded halls of Thebes to the sun-washed temples of Aten. If you enjoy exploring the hidden truths of history, consider tapping the like button and subscribing for more journeys like this. And please share in the comments where you are listening from. It amazes me that across time and oceans we come together to uncover these ancient mysteries side by side. The boy Amenhotep was born within the royal court of Thebes, a child surrounded by splendor yet marked by quiet unease. His father, Amenhotep III, reigned with unmatched majesty, a king whose jubilees were celebrated with golden statues and lavish feasts. Yet within the palaces, the priests of Amun whispered and commanded as though their voices were equal to the king's. Even as a child, Amenhotep felt the weight of their presence, the shadow of temples so vast they seemed to swallow the sky. He walked through courtyards painted with lilies, listening to chants that praised gods he would one day reject. His tutors taught him the sacred names of Ra, Osiris, and Amun, yet his heart stirred when sunlight pierced through open windows, flooding the floor in golden fire. Something in him longed for the simple brilliance of the sun itself, unbroken, unshrouded, pure. At feasts he sat silently beside his sisters, watching his father laugh with nobles while priests lingered at the edge of every gathering. Their jeweled collars shone as brightly as crowns. The boy studied them, seeing power hidden in the folds of incense smoke. He wondered even then, could a god who needed so many men to defend his name truly be the highest of all? As Amenhotep grew, the court changed around him. His father aged, celebrating more jubilees while illness crept into his body. Queen T, sharp-eyed and strong, began to guard her son's path. She whispered guidance in private, reminding him that a pharaoh must see beyond feasts and flattery.
"Watch the temples,"
she told him once, her hand pressing lightly against his arm.
"They grow too powerful."
Amenhotep walked through Thebes with T, past towering pylons where priests collected offerings. He saw peasants lay baskets of grain at Amun's gates, their sweat feeding a god who never bent down to help them. He frowned at the endless line, the priests' hands counting, weighing, storing wealth in chambers larger than most villages. When his father weakened, Amenhotep sat beside the royal bed, watching the once mighty pharaoh breathe heavily. Priests entered the chamber with chants and oils, offering words to Amun, but Amenhotep felt little comfort. He wanted not chants, but the light of the sun to heal his father's spirit. In silence, he opened the shutters, letting gold pour into the chamber. His father's eyes fluttered open, catching the sunlight one last time. In that moment, Amenhotep began to see Aten, the radiant disk, as more than a symbol. It was life itself, generous without needing temples or priests. A quiet seed of devotion took root, though it would be years before it bloomed. The death of Amenhotep III cast silence over Thebes. Funerary chants echoed through stone corridors, priests of Amun leading endless ceremonies, their power swelling with every offering. The young Amenhotep IV, scarcely prepared, now bore the double crown of Egypt. The people expected him to stand as his father had, a servant of Amun. The priests expected obedience. Yet, Amenhotep walked differently. In his coronation procession, he lifted his eyes not to Amun's towering temples, but to the blazing sky above. Courtiers exchanged glances, unsettled by his gaze. In the days that followed, he allowed priests their rights, but his mind wandered. He spent hours in gardens, sketching the sun's rays across papyrus. He drew circles with lines reaching downward, ending in tiny hands that seemed to touch the earth. He showed these to Nefertiti, his new queen, who smiled softly. "The sun embraces us," she whispered, "as no priest can." Her presence steadied him, her devotion fueling his quiet rebellion. Meanwhile, priests pressed upon him with rituals, urging him to dedicate monuments to Amun. Amenhotep agreed outwardly, yet he delayed, commissioning instead small shrines where sunlight fell directly upon altars. He began speaking of Aten in private, words that unsettled his court but stirred his heart. The boy who had once questioned in silence was now a king. And though the shadow of Amun's temples loomed, the first cracks of defiance began to show. The first years of Amenhotep's reign unfolded under watchful eyes. The priests of Amun tightened their grip, surrounding the young pharaoh with counsel that disguised command. They reminded him of tradition, urging festivals, temples, and tributes to the god who ruled Thebes. Yet Amenhotep's heart stirred differently. He found solace not in the incense-choked sanctuaries of Amun, but in the open courtyards, where sunlight fell unbroken on stone. One dawn, he invited Nefertiti to stand beside him upon the palace roof. Together they raised their faces to Aten's rising disk. "See," he murmured, "no wall hides it, no priest carries it. It shines freely for all." Nefertiti's eyes reflected the light, and her voice was steady. "Then build for the sun, not for those who claim it." The words lingered in him. He began sketching grander shrines, open to the sky, their roofs cut away so rays could flood the altars. He spoke of Aten in whispers, calling him the giver of breath and warmth. Courtiers frowned, uneasy with this departure, but Amenhotep did not yield. At banquets, when priests blessed food in Amun's name, the pharaoh raised his cup only after sunlight touched it. Small gestures, subtle yet bold enough to be noticed. Murmurs grew in corridors. Was the young king straying from the path of his fathers? The priests pressed harder. They brought endless petitions, requesting new temples, more land, and richer offerings to honor Amun. Their voices carried an unspoken threat. Kings before him had prospered only under the god's favor, but Amenhotep had grown wary of their entangling power. He walked through temple halls lined with towering statues of Amun, their stony eyes glaring down upon him. He felt no warmth here, only weight. Turning away, he spoke quietly to Nefertiti. "These walls are prisons. The sun asks for no gold, no stone, only the open sky." Yet he knew resistance too soon would provoke open conflict. For now, he agreed to smaller projects, but subtly directed laborers to construct altars where sunlight could strike without obstruction. Priests grumbled at these designs, but Amenhotep smiled calmly, assuring them it was a matter of style. In the privacy of his chambers, he prayed to Aten alone. He raised his hands to the ceiling, whispering thanks for the warmth on his skin, the light that fed the fields, the fire that painted each dawn. The more he prayed, the stronger his conviction grew. Amun's priests could not contain the sun. They could not bind the disk of heaven. Amenhotep IV, Nefertiti, priests of Amun, laborers. Character actions. Priests pressure Amenhotep. Amenhotep observes temples with disdain, agrees outwardly to projects, secretly builds sunlit altars, prays privately to Aten. Picture prompt. Vast temple interior with shadowed statues of Amun. Amenhotep turning away with Nefertiti at his side. Sunlight streaming faintly through a high opening. Whispers spread among Thebes. The king was favoring Aten. Some courtiers dismissed it as a passing fancy, but others grew uneasy. The priests, sensing danger, multiplied ceremonies, parading statues of Amun through crowded streets to display their god's might. Amenhotep watched these processions from a palace balcony. Priests in heavy collars carried gilded barks, chanting praises, while common folk bowed in fear and reverence. Yet the king's gaze turned upward, beyond the statues, to the blazing sun. Why bow to wood and stone, he thought, when the living light is above all? One afternoon, Amenhotep ordered a festival in Aten's honor. It was small, modest, held in an open courtyard, without grand statues or incense. Instead, offerings of bread and flowers were placed beneath the clear sky. Nefertiti joined him, her arms raised as sunlight bathed her face. The people, uncertain at first, followed hesitantly. Children chased beams of light across the floor. For a moment, joy replaced fear. The priests, annoyed, seethed. They whispered that the pharaoh was dishonoring Amun, risking divine wrath. Yet Amenhotep's heart swelled with certainty. Aten needed no intermediaries. The sun gave freely, and in its radiance, he felt a truth too strong to deny. Each day, Amenhotep grew bolder. He began carving Aten's image, the radiant disk with hands reaching downward, on palace walls. This was unlike anything seen before, a god not in human or animal form, but as light itself. Artists hesitated, but the pharaoh insisted, guiding their chisels with his own sketches. At meals, he praised Aten openly, giving thanks before food touched his lips. Courtiers sat in silence, uncertain whether to echo his words. Nefertiti stood firm, joining him with grace, her voice steady in the open halls. Her loyalty strengthened his resolve. The priests confronted him at council. Draped in sacred robes, they warned that neglecting Amun endangered the two lands. They spoke of droughts, plagues, and rebellion. Amenhotep listened, then raised his hand, cutting through their chants. Firmly, "The sun gives life to Nile and field alike," he said. Thoughtfully, "It is Aten who sustains us, not the shadows of stone." The room fell silent. The priests left in fury, their power shaken, but not broken. That night, Amenhotep and Nefertiti walked together under the stars, whispering. "The path grows perilous," she whispered. He nodded, yet his eyes glowed with fire. Resolute, "Aten guides me. No fear can bind the light." The tension in Thebes deepened. The priests controlled vast lands, herds, and workshops, their wealth rivaling the throne. Yet, Amenhotep quietly redirected resources. Instead of endowing Amun's temples, he commanded laborers to raise new shrines for Aten, bright courtyards without roofs, their altars kissed by the morning sun. People began to notice. Farmers offered prayers to Aten at dawn before setting out to their fields. Mothers whispered thanks when sunlight warmed their infants. Slowly, devotion shifted, not by command, but by the quiet pull of light. In retaliation, the priests staged grander ceremonies, demanding loyalty through fear. They warned of curses upon those who neglected Amun. But the more they threatened, the more the people turned to the gentle warmth of Aten, who asked nothing but open hearts beneath the sky. Amenhotep visited these new shrines often, sometimes arriving without escort. He walked among common folk, raising his hands with theirs to Aten. His presence astonished them, for rarely did pharaohs mingle so freely. In their wonder, Amenhotep felt his purpose confirmed. Aten's light was for all, king and peasant alike. Amenhotep's defiance could no longer be hidden. Rumors spread that the pharaoh planned to elevate Aten above all other gods. The priests grew restless, their voices sharp with anger, their threats veiled in ritual language. In council, they demanded greater offerings, warning of disaster should Amun be neglected. Amenhotep rose from his throne, his voice clear and unwavering. "The sun shines on Egypt without your chance. Aten gives freely. Egypt shall give to Aten." His words struck like a blow. Courtiers gasped. The priests departed in fury, vowing resistance. That evening, Amenhotep and Nefertiti gathered their daughters in the palace gardens. They sat together beneath the fading glow, children as they chased the last rays of the sun. Amenhotep spoke softly. "This light will guide us, even when darkness presses close." Nefertiti touched his hand, steadying his resolve. Artists carved frescoes of Aten blessing the royal family, rays ending in hands that touched the king, queen, and children directly. Such images proclaimed a new vision, the royal family chosen by Aten, no priest needed. The conflict was now open. The pharaoh's devotion had become declaration. Thebes trembled with uncertainty. Some hailed the pharaoh's devotion to Aten, while others whispered of blasphemy. The priests, humiliated, plotted in silence, their influence still vast. But Amenhotep no longer wavered. His path was set. He summoned architects and commanded a new vision, a great temple dedicated to Aten, larger than any shrine before. Unlike the enclosed sanctuaries of Amun, this would be open, its walls low, its roof absent. Sunlight would pour unhindered upon the altar, where offerings of bread, wine, and flowers would stand beneath the sky. Builders labored day and night. Stone was hauled from quarries, courtyards widened, columns raised only to frame the open heavens. As foundations took shape, the people marveled at its difference. Children played in the dust, calling it the House of the Sun. When the priests heard of it, their fury shook the council. They accused the king of sacrilege, of abandoning the gods who had guarded Egypt for centuries. But Amenhotep stood before them, eyes bright. Aten alone is the giver of life, he declared, and Egypt shall rise in his light. The struggle between throne and temple had begun in earnest. The first stones of Aten's temple marked not only a new sanctuary, but the birth of a revolution. The Aten temple grew swiftly, its courtyards filling with sunlight each dawn. Amenhotep walked among the workers, encouraging them with words of blessing. He insisted the altar remain uncovered, for no roof should veil Aten's radiance. Each stone carried upward seemed to proclaim his defiance of the old gods. Nefertiti stood beside him often, her presence as luminous as the disk itself. She instructed artisans in detail, guiding the carving of Aten's rays with tender hands reaching to touch the royal family. These images spread through the city, replacing statues of Amun with radiant suns. The people began to speak differently. Instead of whispering prayers at temple doors, they raised their arms to the sky. Farmers offered thanks at sunrise before entering their fields. Fishermen lifted nets toward the glow upon the river. A quiet revolution was stirring, not only in palaces, but in the hearts of common folk. The priests grew desperate. They convened in dark halls, plotting ways to curb the king's rebellion. Yet, even as they schemed, sunlight flooded Thebes each morning, beyond their grasp. Amenhotep's conviction burned brighter with each dawn. At court, unease spread like smoke. Nobles who had long allied with the priests felt torn. To oppose the pharaoh was dangerous, yet to abandon Amun risked losing favor with the most powerful institution in Egypt. Their whispers filled corridors, their loyalty shifting like reeds in the wind. Amenhotep confronted them not with threats, but with vision. He summoned nobles to the Aten temple at dawn. There, without incense or chanting priests, he lifted his hands to the rising disk. Sunlight poured across the courtyard, gilding stone and skin alike. "Behold Aten," he declared, "giver of breath, nourisher of Nile and earth. No priest stands between his light and his people." Some nobles bowed reluctantly, others sincerely. The moment marked a turning tide, an acknowledgement that power no longer flowed solely through Amun's temples, but through the open sky. Still, danger brewed. The priests interpreted the gathering as a direct assault. They began hoarding wealth, tightening control of their estates, and spreading rumors that drought would strike if Aten replaced Amun. Amenhotep listened calmly, but gave no answer. His silence was more threatening than words. Amenhotep summons nobles to Aten temple, demonstrates worship at dawn. Nobles respond with mixed loyalty, priests hoard resources and spread fear. Nobles gathered in an open-air Aten temple at sunrise, Amenhotep lifting arms to the sky, golden rays shining directly upon them. Amenhotep's devotion demanded more than shrines. He dreamed of a new city, free from Thebes, untainted by the shadow of Amun's temples. Standing with Nefertiti beneath the blazing sky, he spoke with quiet resolve.
A place where Aten alone is worshipped, where light touches every stone.
Plans began swiftly. Surveyors were dispatched to find land where the sun rose unbroken, where mountains framed the horizon like open arms. They chose a site on the east bank of the Nile, a place the king declared sacred to Aten. There he envisioned palaces, temples, and wide courtyards, all bathed in light. In council, priests exploded with outrage.
Thebes is the heart of Egypt, they cried. To abandon it is to betray tradition.
Amenhotep's answer was calm.
Tradition is the chain of the dead. Aten is the breath of the living.
His words silenced the hall. The announcement spread swiftly. Some celebrated the boldness of the pharaoh. Others feared the wrath of Amun. But Amenhotep's decision was final. Egypt's capital would rise anew, a city of sunlight. Its name would be Akhetaten, Horizon of Aten. Caravans of workers, artisans, and officials moved toward the chosen site. The desert plain rang with hammer and chisel as foundations of Akhetaten began. Amenhotep walked among them, sleeves rolled, dust covering his sandals, his presence inspiring the laborers. Unlike past pharaohs, he did not hide in distant palaces, but joined the toil, raising his hands to Aten at each dawn. Nefertiti oversaw the artisans, ensuring Aten's rays were carved with grace upon every stone. Their daughters played among the building grounds, laughter echoing against cliffs. To the people, the royal family appeared not distant rulers, but fellow worshippers of the sun. In Thebes, the priests raged at this spectacle. They sent envoys, demanding the project be halted. But their messengers returned defeated, for Amenhotep's determination was unshakable. Akhetaten rose day by day, walls gleaming white beneath the desert sun. The workers named the city before it was finished, City of Light. For in every stone they placed, they felt the warmth of Aten's blessing.
When the first temple of Akhetaten was complete, Amenhotep gathered people from across Egypt for its dedication. Unlike the hidden sanctuaries of Amun, this temple stood wide open. Its columns framed the sky, its altar bare beneath Aten's gaze. At sunrise, Amenhotep and Nefertiti entered, their daughters beside them. Dressed in white linen, they raised their arms as rays spilled over the altar. The people followed, thousands of hands lifting to the heavens. No priest led the ceremony, no chants filled the air. Only silence, broken by birdsong and the steady hum of life in the sun.
For the first time, Egypt's worship was equal. Pharaoh and farmer stood side by side beneath the same light. The moment was breathtaking, unforgettable. In Thebes, the priests ground their teeth in fury. They cursed the king in secret rites, warning that Aten's favor would fade. Yet as word spread of the ceremony, more people turned to the sun at dawn, whispering thanks. Fear gave way to wonder.
The shift of power grew sharper. In Akhetaten, Aten's temples multiplied, their courtyards alive with offerings of bread, flowers, and wine. Sculptors filled walls with images of rays ending in hands, touching the royal family. Amenhotep insisted every depiction show him and Nefertiti embraced by light, chosen as Aten's beloved. The priests of Amun struck back. They spread rumors of famine, claiming Aten withheld the Nile's flood. Yet the river rose in due season, nourishing fields as before. Their lies weakened them, and whispers spread that Amun's power was fading. Amenhotep took a new name to mark his devotion, Akhenaten, he who serves Aten. He announced it before his people, his voice steady. I am Akhenaten, beloved of Aten, chosen to guide Egypt in the sun's light. The name swept across the land like fire, a proclamation that the old order was dying. Nefertiti stood proudly at his side, her own beauty immortalized in countless carvings. Together, they became symbols of a radiant new age.
The priests' fury burned hotter. In Thebes, they continued grand festivals to Amun, parading statues through streets with despot pomp. But fewer people bowed, their hearts drifting toward the light of Aten. Akhenaten ordered Amun statues removed from shrines within his reach.
Some were smashed, others quietly abandoned. Walls were scrubbed of Amun's name, replaced with Aten's radiant disk. Each act shook Egypt, as though centuries of stone were being torn away. Courtiers trembled, fearing rebellion. Yet Akhenaten pressed on, certain that Aten's will guided him. Nefertiti encouraged him, her calm presence a shield against doubt. "Light drives out shadow," she whispered. "Fear cannot endure beneath the sun." At Akhetaten, daily rituals filled the air, not chants in darkness but songs sung under open sky. Children learned to raise their arms at dawn, their laughter echoing against temples. The revolution was no longer hidden. It was lived in every household.
Tension rose to its peak. Messengers from Thebes warned of plots against the throne. Some nobles whispered allegiance to the priests, hoping to preserve old privileges. Yet Akhenaten remained unmoved. He poured his energy into Akhetaten, declaring it the sole capital of Egypt. Official scribes and artisans were commanded to move there, leaving Thebes behind. Palaces rose, streets bustled, temples shone in the sun. Life itself seemed to shift eastward. Still, shadows lingered, crops faltered in certain provinces, giving priests cause to claim Aten's anger. Akhenaten answered by leading public prayers, raising his arms each dawn, urging the people to trust the disk's generosity. His faith did not falter, even when drought touched the fields. Nefertiti matched his devotion, appearing beside him at every ritual. Together they embodied Aten's chosen, their daughters often depicted in art with rays touching their foreheads. The royal family became living symbols of the sun's embrace. The break with Thebes was final. Akhenaten ordered names of Amun erased from monuments across Egypt. Stonemasons carved chisel against stone, striking out hieroglyphs with deliberate force. Silence fell over temples once filled with Amun's praises. The priests raged but could not stop the tide. Their wealth diminished as estates were seized for Aten's temples. Their voices grew hollow, drowned by songs of sunlight in Akhetaten. Yet unrest stirred among some generals and officials who feared Egypt's unity was fracturing. They pressed Akhenaten to honor at least some of the old gods to avoid rebellion in distant provinces. The pharaoh refused.
"There is no god but Aten,"
he declared. His words cut ties that had bound Egypt for centuries. Nefertiti stood as his mirror, repeating his devotion with unshaken grace. Their daughters played in palace courtyards, depicted always beneath Aten's rays. The family itself had become the temple, a living altar to the disk. Akhetaten now gleamed in the desert, a city of white stone blazing beneath Aten's fire. Streets thrummed with life, markets filled with goods from across the empire, courtyards alive with song and prayer. From dawn to dusk, Aten was praised, not in shadow, but in light. Akhenaten presided over daily ceremonies, often bringing Nefertiti and their daughters. Their images adorned every wall, arms raised, heads touched by rays, children kissed by hands of light. The pharaoh proclaimed openly, "We are Aten's chosen, and Egypt lives in his embrace." But beneath the radiance, shadows persisted. Reports came of murmurs in distant lands, provinces uneasy with Aten alone. The priests, though weakened, still plotted in silence, waiting for the pharaoh's strength to falter. Courtiers whispered of danger, yet Akhenaten dismissed their fears. His eyes burned only for Aten, his heart fixed upon the sun. In Akhetaten's blazing streets, the people rejoiced, for now it seemed Egypt had been reborn. Bathed in light, free from the shadow of the old gods, the revolution stood triumphant. Years passed in Akhetaten, the city of light. The temple stood wide to the sky, courtyards filled with flowers, priests of Aten offering thanks beneath the blazing sun. Akhenaten walked among his people, not hidden behind veils of incense, but bathed in the same radiance. The city lived and breathed his vision. Yet messages from beyond its walls grew troubling. In foreign provinces, governors sent word of unrest. Tribes along Egypt's borders tested defenses. Ambassadors begged for reinforcements, but Akhenaten's gaze rarely turned away from Aten. His time was consumed by ceremonies. His energy poured into devotion. Generals whispered of neglect, their voices restless in the palace corridors. Still, within Akhetaten, joy thrived. The royal family appeared daily, with their daughters in gardens, blessing the people with gestures that mirrored Aten's rays. Sculptors carved endless scenes of harmony, walls blooming with images of a radiant world. To those within the city, it seemed paradise had come to earth.
The discontent of generals deepened. Envoys from foreign lands complained that Egypt's army stood idle while rivals pressed harder against its borders. Yet when pressed, Akhenaten dismissed their worries. Aten's light protects the two lands, he said. Our strength lies in devotion, not conquest. His generals bowed reluctantly, but their eyes betrayed unease. Meanwhile, Akhenaten expanded Akhetaten's temples further, commanding artisans to cover walls with hymns of praise. Poets recited verses beneath open skies, celebrating Aten as giver of life. The city thrived with music and worship. Yet outside its gates, Egypt's reach began to waver. Nefertiti noticed the murmurs. In private, she counseled her husband, concerned. The light guides us, but shadows still move in the world. Do not let them gather too close. He held her hand, but shook his head. Firmly, Aten's fire scatters all shadow. His faith was unshaken.
As Akhetaten flourished, cracks appeared in distant provinces.
Reports of rebellion reached the capital, yet Akhenaten seemed deaf to them. He ordered instead new sanctuaries for Aten, their walls painted in brilliant colors. His focus remained inward, on devotion and family, rather than the empire's borders. The priests of Amun, though weakened, seized the chance. In Thebes, that Egypt's strength was fading because the old gods were abandoned. They encouraged unrest, stirring loyalty to Amun among villages that had once bowed to the sun. Akhenaten answered not with armies, but with hymns. He led his people in great festivals, where families gathered in thousands, their arms lifted toward Aten. The celebrations filled the city with huffing and coughing, yet outside its borders, storms gathered.
The people of Akhetaten adored their king.
To them, he was not only pharaoh, but the bridge to Aten. Each morning they saw him emerge from the palace, arms lifted to the disk, his daughters playing at his feet. His devotion seemed endless, his face transformed by light, but to the priests of Amun, he was a usurper. They gathered secretly in Thebes, planning how to restore their power. Some generals, disillusioned by the pharaoh's neglect of war, lent them quiet support. Their whispers carried across Egypt, growing like unseen fire. Akhenaten, unaware or unwilling to heed, expanded his vision still further. He commanded artists to portray Aten, not only blessing the royal family, but embracing all of Egypt. Farmers, builders, and children were carved beneath the sun's rays, each touched equally. His message was clear. Aten belonged to all, not only temples.
Tensions pressed harder. Reports of unrest in Syria and Canaan multiplied. Yet Akhenaten remained focused on Akhenaten's rituals. Generals clenched fists, but carried out his orders in silence. Within the city, devotion reached new heights. At festivals, choirs of children sang hymns as sunlight poured over temples. Nefertiti stood beside Akhenaten, radiant in white linen, her presence a beacon to the people. The royal daughters danced in courtyards, their laughter part of the ritual itself. But beyond the city's glow, famine touched distant provinces. Grain shipments slowed, rebellions flared, and Thebes grew restless once more. The priests pointed to these troubles as proof of Aten's weakness. Their voices rose again, though still muted by fear of the throne.
Whispers of danger reached the palace. Envoys from distant lands begged for troops, warning that Egypt's hold was slipping. Akhenaten heard their pleas, but turned instead to prayer. Aten's light will prevail, he said, dismissing their cries. His words fell like stones in their hearts. Nefertiti's eyes grew troubled. She joined him faithfully at every ritual,
but in private pressed him. The sun warms us, but men still plot in shadows. Aten gave you Egypt to guard as well as to worship. Yet Akhenaten's answer was always the same. Devotion is our shield. No enemy can withstand Aten's fire. As unrest grew, more officials drifted back toward the priests of Amun. The old order stirred, sensing a chance to return.
Despite unrest beyond the borders, Akhetaten shone brighter than ever. Festivals filled the streets with dancers and singers praising Aten. Sculptors carved scenes of harmony, children laughing in courtyards, flowers blooming on temple walls. To those inside the city, it was paradise. But outside, provinces burned. Rival kings wrote desperate letters begging for Egyptian support against invaders. Generals grew bitter, their pride wounded. Still, Akhenaten's focus did not waver. He stood daily at altars, lifting hands to the sky, convinced that Aten's light would protect all lands. The priests of Amun rejoiced quietly. Each neglected border, each unanswered cry, gave them new weapons to use against the heretic king. Their whispers promised that soon Egypt would return to tradition, guided once more by Amun's power.
The years of splendor could not last. Illness crept into the palace, striking courtiers and workers alike. Akhenaten saw it not as curse, but as a trial, urging his people to raise their arms higher to Aten. Yet, sickness spread, leaving whispers of weakness across the land. Nefertiti, ever steadfast, tended to the sick, bringing food and comfort. Her presence calmed many, her compassion binding the people's loyalty.
But even she could not ease the rising doubts. Meanwhile, foreign envoys ceased to come. They believed Egypt abandoned them. Territories once loyal turned to rivals,
And the empire's edges frayed. Still, Akhenaten's gaze remained fixed upon the sun, unwavering. To him, the world outside Akhetaten seemed distant, shadowed, unworthy of his light. As years wore on, Akhenaten's health began to falter. His once tall figure stooped, his features grown sharp beneath the blazing sun. Yet his devotion only deepened. Each morning he still rose to greet Aten, even when his body trembled. Nefertiti guided him gently, sharing his burdens. She appeared more often in public, leading rituals with confidence, her daughters beside her. To many, she seemed a queen of both grace and strength, a partner equal to the king in Aten's service. But in distant temples, the priests of Amun sharpened their blades of influence. They waited patiently, knowing that time itself would weaken their enemy. With each passing season, as Akhenaten's body failed, their hope of return grew stronger.
The final years of Akhenaten's reign passed like fading sunlight.
He could no longer walk easily, yet he still emerged each dawn to lift his hands toward Aten. His voice, though weakened, carried with unbroken conviction. Aten is the breath of life, the fire eternal. Nefertiti stood by him, radiant and unyielding, her presence sustaining the vision. Their daughters, now grown, carried offerings of flowers and bread to the altars, continuing the rituals of their childhood. Within Akhenaten, the devotion remained strong, yet beyond its walls, the old gods whispered once more. In Thebes, the priests prepared for return. They spread word that Amun's silence had ended, that Egypt would be restored when the heretic king passed. Nobles and generals, weary of neglect, began to listen. Akhenaten, however, looked only to the sun. To him, the empire's troubles faded before Aten's brilliance. On his final days, he sat upon the palace balcony, watching light spill across the city he had built. His chest rose and fell slowly, his lips murmuring prayers. At last, as the sun set, his body stilled. The disk dipped below the horizon, and the city of Akhenaten held its breath. In silence, Nefertiti and her daughters raised their arms to the fading glow, their figures outlined in crimson light. The revolution had burned fiercely, and though shadows crept close again, for that moment the city remained bathed in eternal fire.
And so, dear listener, the story of Akhenaten drifts to its quiet end, like the last colors of sunset melting into the horizon. We have walked with him from the gilded halls of Thebes to the radiant courtyards of Akhetaten, watching as he lifted his gaze toward the sun and dared to imagine a world shaped by its light alone. His life was one of vision and struggle, a flame that burned brightly against shadows that pressed in from every side. Now, as the night settles, let us slow our steps. Picture the desert city resting under a sky scattered with stars, its white walls glowing faintly in the moonlight. The courtyards are empty, the laughter of children has quieted, and only the soft whisper of the wind carries across the stones. Within that silence, the memory of Akhenaten remains, a king who believed the sun itself could be enough to guide and protect his people. Breathe deeply and let the warmth of that vision linger. Feel the calmness of an ancient river flowing steadily, the hush of sand beneath your feet, the eternal embrace of sky above. These moments remind us that even in times of conflict, there are voices that seek light, that yearn for peace, that believe in something pure and simple. As your eyes grow heavier, carry with you the image of Aten's rays falling gently upon the earth, hands of light reaching down to touch every living thing. Imagine that glow wrapping around you now, tender and unbroken, guiding you into rest. Sleep well, traveler of history. May the quiet strength of this ancient tale follow you into your dreams as the eternal sun sets only to rise again with the coming dawn.